judgment comes from experience, we're told. The problem is, experience is built on bad judgment. So how do we learn and grow from failure? That's a question that's been posed here at the Global Peter Drucker Forum. And one of the panelists debating it is Nairin Chowdhury, the chairman of Panera Brands. His experience is both personal and professional, coloured as it is by an intensely tragic family experience. But first I began by asking him whether innovation is even possible without a first acceptance that there will be failure.
Well, I think the answer has to be no. And let me tell you, I really think that failure is inevitable. Personal life, professional life. To be human is to fail is to be human. So we're all going to be confronted by it. And the question is, what do we do with it? And how can we allow that to shape who we are? And I believe that failure is an opportunity to transcend and to transform ourselves to become more effective. To your question about innovation, right? We live in a very volatile time, uncertain time, huge amount of complexity and changes, and therefore companies need to be inventive, tenacious, resilient. And as you do that, companies can make two types of failures. One are big failures that can take you down, that are reputational for the brand, for the enterprise. You want to avoid those, right?
You certainly do, yes.
Those you don't want to have anything to do with, and you want to have an enterprise risk management process to proactively address that. However, to your question, there are smaller failures, and these smaller failures are on that virtuous cycle of innovation, which is do, fail, learn, and repeat. And those kind of mini failures, those small failures, you have to encourage. And without that, by definition, you cannot improve, you can't get better. And to do that, I think you need some amount of psychological safety in an organization where people are willing to admit when they make a mistake, and they're in a ways, they're afraid to take risks, to take chances, and to fail. That's required.
So you enable them as the leader in a company to do that sort of failure, but presumably then it's about perspective on what a failure is.
Yes, and perspective, and that's why I was categorizing. You're expecting your leaders to use their judgment around, there are no big failures that are allowed.
Yes.
That can be catastrophic. But small failures, as we are on this virtuous self-improvement, continuous improvement cycle, that's a good thing to do. And you have to have the right culture to allow it. And one of the ways in which I have learned how to create psychological safety is one conversation at a time. And in that conversation, you're always trying to ask for people to disagree and to be comfortable saying you're wrong, and to have the courage to tell you why you're wrong and why their idea might be different or might be better, where everybody gets a chance to be heard. So I think I try and encourage disagreement, divergence over convergence, one conversation at a time. And I have seen through that, when you celebrate people who disagree with you and thank them for their input, that then becomes the expected culture. And people feel safer to disagree, to debate, and then to be more willing to fail than otherwise.
Does it all come from the top? Is it all about permission to fail, the parameters that you set for disagreement, and therefore a sort of humility from the top as well, a willingness to say, yeah, you're right, your point is better than mine?
I really believe that culture starts at the top. It starts with the leader and the leadership team, what they say, but more importantly, what they do, and whether they're authentic and they truly mean it. And it is for the leaders to create that kind of environment in which people feel safe to disagree and to make mistakes. Failure also, is perhaps in one of two ways. One is when something happens to you which is totally outside your control. It's a black swan event. There's nothing you can do, and it happens to you. And I wouldn't say the pandemic or COVID was like that, because even in that context, there's still something you could do. But there's some events in which you're just absolutely knocked out and there is nothing you can do. So, I've actually lost two of my children over the years. And I would describe when that happens, when you lose somebody like that and there's nothing you can do in the world to save them, then you ask for serenity to accept that failure through acceptance, humility, and also forgiveness for yourself. Because, when my daughters passed away, both of them due to terminal illnesses, I felt very guilty as a father, and I felt in some ways responsible, and I had to learn to forgive myself. However, there are other failures which are self-inflicted, And I think there are many of us, I don't know if it's like that with you, who score self-goals. And when I reflect on it, for me actually, it's invariably moments when my strength goes unchecked and is overplayed. It's not my weakness, it's my strength. So for example, one of my strengths is, I trust people, I love people, and I believe people. I take things at face value. You can imagine if it's unchecked, I may lose touch with reality or truth or what's actually happening, or I might fall in love with people and not fire them when they need to be fired, right? And that's not very good. Or I'm very curious, I love ideas, I fall in love with new ideas, and if it is unchecked, I can drive the organization crazy with, the organization losing focus. So I need to therefore be self-aware, but beware my strengths and build some interventions. For example, I need to have truth tellers in the organization who can calibrate me and say, hey, listen, this is what's truly happening and you ought to know that. Or I need to have people on my executive team who keep me disciplined around focused efforts in the organization. So that's how I distinguish in a company. It's like, there could be black swan events, there's nothing you can do about it, and in those moments just accept it and just move on. And then there are things that you can control as a leader. Always take accountability. I really believe you have to take personal accountability and learn from it. And that's why I think it's such a great opportunity to transcend failures and then to transform yourself to become more effective.
I mean, it's difficult to pass on what you've just said, because obviously it was great personal tragedy, and trying to distinguish the failures you can do something about. Is it tempting for some people, though, to categorise failures that are in their control as, well, that's a black swan event, nothing I could do about it? How do you make sure you're honest with yourself about your failures?
That's a great question. I think, again, I would, to me it comes down to the question of leaders having integrity as a core value and congruence as a core value, that what I think, I feel, I say, I do are all consistent, and I have the integrity to actually always be honest with myself and with other people. I think without that it's impossible. So I would assume that if somebody is leading a company, they have those qualities, and if they have those qualities, maybe they're not asking them the question hard enough, that is this truly a black swan event, or could I have done something differently? And that question is a pivotal question.
I have to ask you just finally, what is, when you're honest with yourself, your biggest business failure, and what did you learn from it?
I've had too many to count. I fail a gazillion times a day. I want to actually talk more about what can you do to prepare for it for when you will fail, but fail you will.
So it's inevitable it'll happen?
It's inevitable that it will happen. Inevitable to all of us. I'm sure that sounds very inspiring. But
well, actually, it's quite reassuring, I'm sure, to many people.
And this is the one. I really feel that we need to build resilience, almost like a muscle, to be ready for when failure strikes. And it's through resilience that you can transcend and you can transform. And let me give you maybe 3 ways in which you can build resilience. First is almost like going to the gym. Resilience is a daily habit. If there are things in our life that we think we cannot do or we don't want to do it. Because you have to be tenacious and you have to have that inner courage and being tenacious to do it. Like, going to the gym, not feeling like going to the gym, you think you should be going to the gym, but you don't want to go to the gym, go to the gym. And if you say, okay, I'm not a musician, I don't think I can play an instrument, learn the instrument. And I think that's a simple but powerful way of building that tenacious muscle. The second one is about self-love, which is live life with no regrets. Whatever your dream is, whatever your little heart desires, good, bad, ugly, do it and do it now. There is no past, there is no future, the only moment is now. So do it, you know. So whether it's that holiday that you wanted to take, or the game that you wanted to play, or a sport you wanted to learn, or a romantic interest that you had, express it, do it, and do it now. Love yourself, through that you build emotional fortitude. And the last one is all the failures in life that we accumulate, embrace them all like your favorite children and allow them to shape who you are becoming. So for me, for example, with the loss of my children and failures at work, I have learned the following. One, to live with a note of, or with a tone of gratitude, which is to be grateful for what I have and not live in despair for what I have lost. To live a life of generosity, to serve others, people, community, planet, will give me emotional fortitude. And finally, to beware my strengths, remind myself that I don't want to change who I am, but there is obviously a dark side to my strengths, and I must make sure that I have people who will give me the feedback when required and help me become the best version of who I can be.